You are listening to the Yoga for Balance podcast. I'm your host, Heather Gjerde. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening. As usual, I'd love to start our episode by just sinking into the present moment with the breath. So wherever you are, let's take a nice full deep breath in. Fill your belly, your chest, all the way to the top. Open mouth, exhale, let go. Take two more like that. Fill your lungs to capacity. Sigh, release, let something go here. One more, your deepest breath yet today. Hold in a relaxed way at the top. Sip in a little more. And open your mouth, let it go. Good. I hope you're feeling even more relaxed, present, and ready for this week's conversation. This week on the show, we have Hannah Block of Union Yoga in San Diego. Hannah recently opened Union Yoga alongside Rex Vienna, her fiance, in order to help and create a safe space for people affected by trauma, including eating disorders and alcoholism. We talk more in depth about how yoga can be a support system for someone who is affected by or dealing with a current eating situation and how it really helped her when she was going through her own process. We go really deep into that on this episode, and Hannah offers some really wonderful tips for providing that safe space within a class, as well as things that you might be able to do if you have someone in your life who has been affected by this. Thank you again for listening, and enjoy this empowering and insightful episode with Hannah Block. Hello. We are back on the Yoga for Balance podcast. I'm your host, Heather Gjerde, and today I have a special guest for you, Hannah Block. Welcome, Hannah.
Hi.
Thank you so much for being here. I know this is a very exciting, busy time for you. You and Rex are in the midst of opening a yoga studio, in the midst of a yoga teacher training, and among all of the other stuff that you're doing in your day-to-day, from teaching and all of the fun business that goes with being a yoga teacher. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
So I'd like to start taking a big step back and just talk a little bit about what your experience of yoga has been. First, I'm guessing as a student, and then as you are now as a teacher.
I first started practicing yoga when I went to treatment for an eating disorder. I moved to San Diego from Connecticut in 2012. And it was in treatment that I began to feel like the power of the practice and how it started to connect me back to my body, allowed me to slow down a little bit. And it was a way that I could move that was like healthy movement that didn't feel like I was like hurting my body. Like I could find more of a balance in the way that I was interacting with my body and interacting with my mind as a part of that practice and not just like a very physical, active, almost like beating down my body sort of thing. And after that, I continued to practice at home for probably 2 years on my computer, doyogawithme.com. Fiji McAlpine was actually like my favorite teacher on that website. But they had a bunch of free classes that were all different levels. And so you could kind of pick the level, the length. And so I was practicing at home. And I moved to OB and I went to Happy You Namaste, which is sadly no longer there. But I started practicing there, and I did my 200-hour teacher training there. I started doing work for trade there. And yeah, that's kind of like where my roots are.
And so talking about finding yoga in your eating disorder, when you were going through that treatment, how did that help you along your process and your healing?
It allowed me to slow down. It allowed me to begin to see a balance between like the physical and the mental and the spiritual, and brought me into my body. Because so much of the activity that I was used to doing was, I didn't know how to balance like moving and eating and interacting with my emotions. And so it kind of gave me an opportunity to slow down and go inside. And it became a practice of self-study, really. Like at that point, I didn't know anything about the 8 limbs, but the more that I study the 8 limbs, like svadhyaya, that practice of self-study has become so important to me. And it's almost like dissecting my thoughts and my movements, and it gave me the space to do that, to really like dive into like my own weird spaces within my mind and emotions, which aren't that weird, but to become more comfortable to explore those and be in the sensations. I wasn't comfortable being in the sensations that came up, especially coming from background with like a lot of trauma. And yeah, it really gave me the space to look at something in a different way and feel something, knowing that I'm in a safe space and that I can hold space for myself.
Yeah. And how might you tell if someone you love is struggling with this, and maybe yoga could be a tool to help them?
That's a tricky question.
Mm-hmm.
It's a tricky question. Because it's so deep rooted, and it's less about the body. There's like this big misconception that it's all about the body, and that's what the control becomes. And so much of that control comes from other things being out of control, and those are things that like are never necessarily going to be in that person's control in a direct way. And for me, it was a lot of depression, and it was almost like this slow suicide in a way. And so I guess the same sort of things that you see in depression, of like people pulling away, people being closed off and isolating, you can't really base it on someone's body necessarily. Like there's clues within the body, and it's not necessarily how thin or how big you are, but even just the eyes, like the way that someone looks at you, the way that their skin is, this overall appearance of being here, like this life within you. And so much of an eating disorder, for me at least, was pulling the life out of me, and that felt safe, like I could protect myself and no one could touch me and no one could hurt me, especially if I couldn't feel myself. And so it's a lot of dissociation. So I'd say a lot of like isolation would be like one cue to it. Isolation around food, social isolation in general, and anxiety. And I think it's hard to tell 100%, especially the more that I've been around it through treatment, and my sister had an eating disorder, and all of these little things that are kind of hard to pick up on. They're like little nuances of the way that people will move their food around a plate, or like play with things to create this illusion that they're consuming. I think that those are some ways to kind of tell. And then simultaneously, like there's different types of eating disorders, you know? Like you could be like overeating, or you could be purging, and all of that is really hard to like dissect, like what exactly is that going to look like to someone, because it's going to look different in every person. And then the way to like reach out, showing up. I think showing up, like showing that you're there no matter what. I think that so much of the emphasis when someone finds out that someone has an eating disorder is on helping them change their habits around food, when, since it's not about the body, it's not about the food, that's like a manifestation. So it becomes about that because you can control that. And putting energy and attention towards these other aspects of this person as a human being showing that you're there for them, being able to sit down, have a conversation, reaching out to them, trying to hang out with them, especially bringing someone out of the isolation, and then creating new positive associations around food, I think is really important. So now we're in this like culture, in this society, we're so used to just, it's like an unknown. You don't even know like necessarily all the time what it is that's in your food or what you're eating or how it was prepared or how it was grown, where it was grown. And so coming back to the roots can be really helpful. At least it was in my process. Knowing where my food is coming from, being a part of making my food, but making it with people or surrounded in a new environment, new association. So like coming from a space of most likely a lot of trauma around eating necessarily. Like for me, a lot of my family dinners were not really family dinners, and most of the time like a lot of plates of food got thrown away and there was fights, and so I had all this like anxiety around eating, and then I had this mirrored to me of like, if you're upset you don't eat, and so I was like, oh, okay, like if you're upset it's normal, if you're upset you just never eat. And so being able to create new positive associations around food, so like being a part of where the food is grown or being a part of picking food, and then knowing that there's no expectation as to what you do with your food. Like if you just need to prepare food for like however many experiences that you're going to sit with this group of like awesome people that are supporting you, and you're going to prepare the food, and maybe you sit there and don't eat for X amount of times, and in my mind, what I assume and what I've seen within myself is that in time there becomes this comfort and this new association and this idea of, I want to be a part of this, as opposed to, this is going to make me way too vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are really good tips, because I think it's hard. You don't always know, I mean, there have been several people in my life that I've learned have had struggles with eating and that I'm very close to, and I had no idea until they told me. So understanding how to kind of hold that space and show up and be there for them is really important.
Yeah. And mirroring healthy habits, especially if you're in a close relationship with someone. And then being able to talk about it too is really important, especially the farther along that someone gets in their process. For me, being able to talk to people about their own experiences with food, because I was so confused. I didn't really understand like what I was supposed to do, and treatment centers have a very interesting approach, and it becomes all about the food, and almost like you don't have any control in that, and they're taking the control away to kind of like force this point of like, you don't need to control this, but simultaneously it takes away the power from the individual. It took away my power, and then the habits that I was taught were not necessarily like a balance up from where I came from to like this like space of like, feel what you need, or like it was like so much of, you don't know what you need and you can't really trust yourself or your body at this point, and so you need to do this. And then it almost brought me from being in this place of like super restricting to this place of, I just do what I'm told almost. And even if that's like too much, like literally making me sick too much, they were just like, here's a pill for that, like here's a pill for that. And there was all these like, okay, but now it doesn't make a lot of sense to go from this place of like, okay, I'm restricting, to now I'm eating so much that you're giving me a pill so that I don't like have acid reflux, or so that I don't have nausea, or I don't like actually like vomit in my mouth, because of literally like they're trying to make you gain weight. And so it becomes like this complete juxtaposition, and it doesn't really create this space necessarily for you to get to know your body and explore that.
Which yoga does such a great job of doing.
Yeah.
So it's really beautiful that, that you found that at the time where you really needed something else. That, okay, this was a start. It was something, a path to go down. Yeah. Do you think, would you recommend people going to that sort of clinic if they think they might need that? Or, I mean, is it so individual depending on the person?
It's definitely really individual. I think that although I had some not so positive experiences within going to treatment, that for me, simultaneously, it was the right thing to do because I had no idea what I needed to do. Like, I was at a point of, I'm pretty sure I'm going to die soon. And at that point, like, I didn't even know how to eat. Like, it sounds really stupid, but like the first day I went to treatment, I remember them being like, okay, you're going to go downstairs and you're going to pick some food out. And I was like, I just literally had no idea how to do that. I didn't know. It was like a complete unknown. I had built up all of these barriers, and it had become such a habit to move in a certain way that I physically didn't know, like, food to mouth, that action was, it was so overwhelming that I couldn't really, like, process that. And so for me at that point, I really needed that help. And I think there's a lot of benefit in being around other people that are struggling with the same thing that you are. This normalizing of it and realizing more of the roots, even if the way that it's being dealt with isn't always the best. And I think it depends on the treatment center too. Like, there's some treatment centers that are way, way more clinical, and then there's some treatment centers that do give you more freedom. Like, one treatment center I went to, which actually sadly isn't open anymore, but you would cook for yourself some of the time, and so you started to build these new positive associations, and you would grocery shop, and one of the biggest things is like this integration back into reality after treatment. It's like there's no, like, you go from this place of like, here is your meal in front of you, like one of the treatment centers, like, you have no choice in your food, you're not a part of the preparation, a plate gets put in front of you, you can't ask what's on the plate, like, you can't ask anything, and you just are supposed to eat it all. To then, I have to go out into the real world, and I'm supposed to now get myself the food and prepare the food and sit with myself and eat it. And so, yeah, the community base around that can be really helpful. And I think finding a space that you're doing your own research, if you are struggling, like taking the time to find what feels like it could fit. And there's never a point that it's 100%. Like, one of my mantras used to be, when you walk to the edge of all the light you have into the darkness of the unknown, one of two things must happen. You will have something solid to stand upon, or you will learn how to fly. And that's like something that was just over and over and over in my mind that kept me kind of taking the next right step of like, something's gonna be there.
One step at a time, not being overwhelmed. And like you said, maybe it's that center, maybe it's starting yoga, a couple things, letting people know in your life, I think, that this is happening. So like you said, normalizing it, like making it into reality and admitting that there's something going on and that you could use some support, I think could be a big help too.
Definitely saying something. Taking the stigma and the fear away, or dissipating it slightly, I guess. Because it's a secret and you hold that as control. So much of it is control. And so once your secret's outed, it's a tool. Any addiction is a tool until it stops losing its purpose, until it stops having its benefits. So at one point, my eating disorder saved my life. And then it got to the point that no matter what, it was going to get to that point, but it got to that point that it wasn't saving my life anymore, and now it was just killing me. But at one point, that was my lifeline.
What other ways did you find, so continuing a yoga practice, integrating back to real life, are there any other tips that, so anyone that's maybe gone through something like this recently, that's trying to figure out this day-to-day?
Therapy definitely helped me a lot. And finding a therapist that I resonated with and felt connected to, and that took a really long time. I had gone through many therapists when I was in Connecticut, and it was actually my first therapist that I met when I went to treatment in San Diego that I've now been with for 7 years. And like, I don't go as frequently, but I still go, and it's just a part of like my personal care and like my self-care practice. So therapy for sure helped. Nature, going into nature and reconnecting to nature and moving my body in ways that wasn't necessarily always to get a certain result, but instead to connect back to my body and to have healthy habits, like healthy lifestyle, thinking of exercise less about calories or making something out of my body and more about a healthy lifestyle. Other things that were helpful. I went to a lot of meetings. In my early recovery, I went to a lot of meetings, and the 12 steps have power in them, and this giving back, like that has always been really important. And that's like part of the 12 steps is like you then are offering something back to the community. And it gives you a sense of responsibility and a sense of power simultaneously. My dog too. Yeah. Having something, like, it's really what it is having something that gives you a purpose. And on the days that I was too depressed to get out of bed, it's like, I gotta get out of bed, man. The dog is gonna go to the bathroom on the carpet if I don't. But that, like, as like a self-care, like, practice, and I don't think I'm not recommending to someone that's like super depressed that you should just get an animal because you need to be able to take care of the animal. But on the hard days, like, for me, having an animal and like having a buddy and having someone that was always kind of there definitely helped me through a lot of my process.
I love it. My dog's not here right now, and I can just miss her presence. They just bring, so much life and joy and unconditional love. And you look at them smiling at you if you're having a bad day or you're feeling down about yourself. And it's like, if only I'm like half the person my dog thinks I am. I'm doing okay. And you can get you outside. We were just talking about in our yoga teacher training about how we're living our yoga and how we're seeing it, come into our lives. And I was just thinking the other day, walking her, I always try to leave my phone at home, and it gets me out. We're very lucky to live somewhere where we can pretty much walk outside most of the year. And so I'm walking her out, and it's beautiful weather right now, and she just stops to smell things. And she just wants me to stop and enjoy this and be present. And I notice the most beautiful flower and the most gorgeous bird chirping ahead. And it's like, if it wasn't for her, I would not be taking these walks. And they really turn into a moving, walking meditation and presence and that connection to nature. And it's just so refreshing. It's like, there's so much more than me and my problems and my stories that I can get so caught up in,
Yeah, I think of dogs almost as like, I have lots of different ideas of ways to kind of work with eating disorders and treatments and stuff like that. And one of the things that I thought of was working with rescue dogs, because we're really good at sometimes we're really good at like observing other things and taking care of them, but sometimes we can't really apply that to ourselves. And if I think about a dog, like a rescue dog, especially one that's like, you're kind of rehabilitating them as you're rehabilitating yourself, and you can kind of eat when the dog eats, and you bring the dog out to like exercise, but when the dog gets tired, you're like, oh, okay, like I need to stop now. Whereas sometimes that like stop wouldn't come if you didn't have something else there that was like, oh no, but like I'm gonna lie down now. Like the dog's like, I'm gonna lie down, and dogs like nap, they rest, they have this like really like balanced approach, because they're not like cats where they sleep all day, but they kind of push you to, I don't know, see your own rhythms a little bit more.
Yeah. That's funny. Sometimes Izzy just wants to sleep all morning. I'm like, come on, you can get out of bed now.
My dog, I guess, is really hyper.
She decides, though. Sometimes she'll get a little burst of energy and want to go all out. But I do also try to remember she's 10. Maybe she shouldn't go for a run around the bay with me.
Yeah.
Or a little bit of a shorter one. And so now you're offering a really interesting way of helping people that may have an eating disorder to find yoga, and also other trauma that people may have experienced. You've created and are holding space for that. So I'd love you to talk a little more about the current project that you're behind.
So Rex and I are opening a yoga studio in Hillcrest, and it's called Union Yoga. And what we're doing is donating $1 of every visit and $3 of every month of membership to a fund called the Union Yoga Fund. And we're going to use that money to offer sliding scale yoga to people struggling with eating disorders and alcoholism. Both of us have found yoga, meditation, breath work, all of these practices really beneficial in our recovery process. And it's not super accessible to a lot of people. And we want to create a space where people feel safe. A lot of studios, there's almost like this marketing of yoga as being like this unattainable thing in some form. Like, it means you're on the beach and your life is perfect and you're in a bathing suit and you're doing yoga in the sand. And that's not what it is for me. And I think it creates some intimidation to come into that space, especially when you're not feeling good about yourself. When you may be depressed or you may be super anxious and like socially feel uncomfortable and you're not comfortable with your body, and coming into a space that you feel is this almost ideal. And so we want to create a space that feels welcoming, especially to people struggling in their life. And I know that at that point in my life, like, I couldn't afford to go to yoga. But if there was something like I got to do work for trade, which was like a gift to me. Like, I'm so grateful for that. And the same thing for Rex. Like, he got to do work for trade. And that opportunity, it gave me responsibility. It's not just that I was receiving something for nothing, but I had to commit. And so the reason that's not just free yoga and it's sliding scale is so that the importance of feeling that responsibility, it's like the same thing as like the 12 steps when you're giving back, you know? You have responsibility, you have a commitment, and you kind of hold yourself a little bit more accountable and you feel a little bit more accomplished, a little bit more of a purpose. And so being able to sit down with someone and be like, what can you afford? And if it's $3, it's $3, and that's awesome. But just even that $3, putting that forward is like, I'm here, I'm showing up, I'm going to show up. I'm going to show up for myself, I'm going to show up for you, I'm going to show up for this community. And so that's one of the reasons that we decided to, because we're like playing with the idea of like free sliding scale. And so we kind of stuck with sliding scale. And creating a space that feels safe, it feels welcoming. So with eating disorders, like, it can be really triggering around the body specifically, like working with your body and being still or being slow in anything that you have trauma. Like, I know more about eating disorders, so I can talk on that a little bit more because that's where I come from. But being able to be in a space that feels welcoming to that, and a space that you would want to bring your kid to. So like so many of the studios, if your teacher is taking their shirt off, or if your teacher is wearing like kind of revealing clothing, that may not be wrong in one space, but we want to create a space where, like, if you brought your kid into class, you wouldn't be like, oh, well, that's a little revealing, or whatever it is. Just a more like family-oriented community vibe. And that's what I really found in Happy You too. And so like that, to me, what Carson and Mitch did in that space holds like a really powerful place in my heart, and it inspires me as I move on and create my own vision of a space.
And what other things can any teachers or studio owners listening do? Or even, I guess, if Yeah, if you're teaching a yoga experience or hosting a space like this, like what are other ways to make people feel safe? And I think even just talking about trauma, I know we've talked about that in regards to adjustments and asking people for permission and all of that are just kind of these base level things that teachers should consider, not knowing whether someone's carrying trauma like this with them.
I think as a teacher, going up to your students, like showing up early enough that when people come to your class, that you can go up to them. And something that's really like a part of my practice is going up to someone and asking them, how are you? Like, what's your name? Is there anything going on in your body that you want me to know about? And even if it's nothing, they're not going to tell me anything. Just the fact that I'm interacting with this person on a deeper level of just like, here I am, just me and you right now, and I'm giving you my attention, so that they feel like in time maybe they become more comfortable to share. In my training with Leslie Kaminoff, he said, I'm pretty sure this is from Descachar, but he said that the relationship that you have with your student is more important than any of the techniques that you're teaching them. And that was really powerful for me, because I feel that my relationship with my students is more important. So I think taking that time to say hi to your students and learn their names and learn something about them. Um, like you said, asking permission for adjustments, because there's a balance of giving someone their own space to experience what it is that they're experiencing and helping them and assisting them. And then the types of touch, like coming from trauma, like light grazing touch along the skin can feel really uncomfortable and triggering. So when you're coming in to give an adjustment, feeling like you've already asked them, they know that you're coming in, making some sort of sound, especially if their eyes are closed, so that they don't get scared. And then like a, a good pressure, like a good, like, I'm here, I'm not too much, I'm not too little, but I'm here. And then I think something that I've noticed is that people will be very clearly struggling with something in their life, whether it's, like we said, like in the beginning, talking about how can you tell, like it's hard to tell, but sometimes you can really clearly tell that someone's struggling with something. And I've found that people get scared to approach that person, and then that becomes some form of risk for everyone involved, and a lack of mirroring what you're feeling inside about someone, especially when you can observe the shifts of, say, someone that was in a healthy space, that you could tell was in a healthy space, and you see their body shift or their skin shift or something shifting, that, or even just the way that they come into the space and maybe they no longer are making eye contact with you, or their mat tends to now always be in the corner and they're not comfortable being around people. And sometimes that's fine, and sometimes that's, can I like reach a hand out to you, can I ask you how you're doing? And so I think reaching out to someone can be really helpful, even if it's not in a direct like, oh, you look like you're doing bad, but like, how are you, or do you want to get tea? Yeah, I think that just being more interactive with the people that are coming through the door.
Yes, I think it's always essential to remember it's about that one-on-one. As much as a teacher, you're teaching to a space, it's that person having their own experience and holding the space for that, whatever that experience is, and at whatever point in the experience they're at. So yeah, those are all really, really good tips. And staying after as well. Coming early, and there's always the lingerers. So yeah, not scheduling your classes so close that you're running off and then you're stressed. I don't think that's very yoga-esque anyway. It's, really this how practice. So when you leave that yoga studio, yeah, you could stay for the 10, 15 minutes after. I have a few students that are always staying to walk out with me or to talk with me for those few minutes. And that could be where the gold, I find that's when some of the most gold comes out, because they've gone through that practice and something may have rang true for them at that point, and then that's when they're open to speak with you about it. And they may not tell you the first time or the second time. I think I've shared this. I had a student share about my singing bowl and that kind of triggering something and opening it up. And she didn't tell me that until 2 classes later, but she kept coming back because I held that space. And then eventually when she felt open enough, that's when she shared it. So it may not be the first, second, third class. It might be months down the line of you, like you said, building that relationship with a student where they actually feel comfortable enough to go to you as someone. Yeah, it could be a really powerful thing to be there for someone, be that person that maybe is outside of their immediate friend group or family group, and it's less vulnerable to go to someone that doesn't know you so much, maybe as a handout or as for a hand to just, yeah, another opportunity to process and have some supports.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that we didn't cover that you would like to say to anyone that either themselves may be struggling with this or know someone that is on this journey to health healing? And yeah.
I think the main thing that I would want to say is that it's not comfortable to go through the space of diving deeper into where the habits are coming from. But with the right support, there's a way to do it. And a lot of the time, the habits, the addictions, they're just layers on top of what's really going on. They're a barricade that feels safe to be behind. And so even if it's not all the time, finding pockets of space that you can go into the feelings. And even if it's like giving yourself 3 minutes on a timer of I'm going to feel for 3 minutes and then I'm going to turn the feelings off, can be really helpful. I found it helpful. Like, okay, if there's an ending point to this, then if there's an ending point to this, then I can handle this. And reaching out, finding community, even if that's in a meeting where you don't know anyone, like you're saying, like this idea of going to a space where maybe there's not so much personal connection at first, and you can talk about what's going on. I think diving through the layers slowly and giving yourself an opportunity to study yourself. Yeah, I say at the end of all my classes, may our practices be more clever than our habits. And that was something also Leslie Kamenoff training. But that idea for me holds like a lot of power of, can my practices be more clever than my habits? Like, can I change as everything around me and within me fluctuates?
And I think that's really empowering, knowing you can grasp that and have a practice. And I love when you say that at the end of your practice. Okay, so my last 2 questions are, first, a 10-minute tip. Do you have something you would recommend for anyone listening at home, 10 minutes of something they can start doing today to find a little more balance?
10-minute tip.
Yeah, anything. Start. You have something today to try. What would you recommend?
I think that stillness is important and extremely hard. So I would say maybe like 5 minutes of movement in some sort, whether it's like singing or dancing or, like just rolling around on a mat, drawing, anything that feels expressive in any form. And then taking like 5 minutes, and I think at first meditation is really hard, and being able to find stillness for 5 minutes can be really powerful. And I would layer on points of focus for the mind, because like the mind always wants to control something, And I found for myself that if I give my mind something monotonous to control, something repetitive, that it almost like fills the mind to empty the mind. So focusing on the breath first, and then maybe inhaling a mantra or counting the length of the breath. It can be any sort of mantra, like I am is your inhale and exhale is here. And just kind of layering on points of focus. So first start with the breath, then start with a mantra. You may find some form of mudra within the hands, like bringing the fingertips together, visualization to it. So like you can inhale light up the length of the spine and exhale light down the length of the spine. So you're just layering on these points of focus for the mind. And so it's like now you have the breath, you have a visualization of a light moving up and down the spine, and then you have a mantra linked to that as well, and you kind of just keep giving the mind something to control, and maybe there's a little stillness that comes.
That's a great one. I like the movement first.
Yeah.
Anytime I try to sit right in my meditation, like this morning, I finally, nope, I'm rolling the yoga mat out first, some Sundays at least. I like to get right to it, so I don't skip it, but I do. I find them just so much more peaceful if I just get a little movement out. So finding a fun way to move, whatever feels expressive to you, I love that. Not even necessarily needing it to be your yoga asana, dance, creativity, getting the mind swirling, and maybe off of a screen.
Yeah.
So finally, last question. What does balance feel like to you?
Balance, I feel like it's change. Like this ability to see what is going on like take the time to see what's going on around me and within me, and to change. Like the balance is always going to shift. On one day, what's balanced to me is going to be really different on another day. And so giving myself the room, the space to oscillate or to fluctuate.
Thank you, and thank you so much for being on the show, for all the work that you do, the incredible work you've been doing for years as a yoga teacher and now as a yoga studio owner, about to open up here. It's really incredible, and the space that you're holding, especially now for this community that you have found your healing through, and that now you're passing that along to others. So thank you very much, Hannah.
Thank you for having me.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Also, where can our listeners find you?
If you go to unionsd.yoga, that's our website for Union Yoga, and you can find all the information when we're opening and pre-sale deals, all the fun things, schedule, all the teachers. It's in the process right now, so you may go and it's not completely done, but unionsd.yoga.
Yeah, I think by the time this will be out, the studio will be open or close to opening. So you're the first to know. So thank you again, Hannah. And be sure to check that out. I will link everything up in the show notes at vintantra.com, vintantra.com. Thank you. Thank you again, Hannah, for being here on the show, and thank you at home for taking the time to listen. I know there's a lot of ways you can be using your valuable time, and the fact that you're taking your yoga off the mat and into your speakers means so much. So thank you again, and Union Yoga is now open if you'd like to check that out in San Diego. The show notes will include links to the studio so you can check it out. And if you appreciated this week's episode, be sure to subscribe wherever you listen and share the love by leaving a 5-star rating and review while you're there. Thank you again for listening, and until next time, namaste.